Euphoria is back this week with episode 6 of season 3, and the ending of this episode truly marks the beginning of the end as there are now only 2 installments left. This is probably one of the best episodes of the season in my opinion. From Alamo's backstory on how he never learned to trust people, especially women, the setting up of what feels like Rue's death after she finally found God and was looking for salvation, and also Cassie deleting her account following landing a role on network television. The ending of this episode marked a dark direction for several characters moving forward, and I'm here to discuss exactly why. So with that, let's break down the episode, explain the ending, and I'll share what I thought of it. Here is Euphoria Season 3 Episode 6 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Cassie's storyline in this episode pretty much leaned into the fact that opportunities were coming her way without even really needing to try anymore. We saw her having success with her selling photos of herself, and she was now working with Kitty and Magick inside of Alamo's club with Maddy, but at the same time with her getting the opportunity on network television as job applicant when she was filming the scene which was only supposed to be a single appearance character. She transformed that into a recurring role. When she was on set, we saw that the character in dialogue reminded her of the betrayal that Nate did towards her and the fact that he'd lied to her for all of that time. Hence why she was so upset and started talking about how she truly felt, rather than speaking the lines that were in the script. This showed that not only did she still care for Nate after he betrayed her, but it more so showed the hold that he had over her, even after he messed her around. Cassie felt like she was now alone and was paying the price of this unhappiness because the only reason she was originally with Nate was because she betrayed her best friend Maddy all of those years ago. So it was almost like it was just never meant to be and that there was a cost to it somewhere along the line. With her breaking down on set, the writers saw a depth to the character that she previously didn't see before, and after hearing about what Cassie did in selling the photos of herself online, she thought it would be a good story arc to have in the show. A character that was trying to better themselves and escape a life that they no longer wanted. Cassie is basically just hungry for fame, that's all there is to it. The idea of being seen by millions of people on TV is a dream that she has and doesn't want to let go of. However, the price of her being on that show was the network saying to her that she had to delete her account where she was selling the photos. This was something that she was actually struggling to do because of the recent success that it brought her. However, she did manage to do it, and after she pressed delete, she almost didn't feel the weight that she thought she would. This is because I think that weight is going to come crashing down on her in a completely different way. If you remember back to last week, Cassie signed a contract with Maddy which essentially gave Maddy control over Cassie's work, so simply deleting the account isn't going to be an option for her. This is going to show a couple of different things. The first is that it's going to put a wedge between both Maddy and Cassie won't feel like Maddy is treating her like the best friend that Cassie felt like they were. But as well, at the same time, I feel like Cassie is going to be in a position where she's not going to be able to stop doing the work with Maddy, which will mean that she can't be on the network show that she's always dreamed of. This will highlight how Maddy is essentially just like Alamo and how side by side those industries actually are. The control that Maddy is going to have is going to be large, all because of that contract that Cassie willy-nilly signed. With Cassie receiving Nate's finger inside of a box at her apartment, it not only showed the joint responsibility because they're married and how once they're done with Nate, they're most probably going to turn to her. But I feel it also brought to light how much she still loved Nate, and this could be the thing that drives her back to him. I think Cassie could actually stand to lose it all as well, with Maddy potentially hitting her with legal action, so her and Nate might actually wind up in the same boat. Rue's story in this episode was actually pretty interesting because not only did we see her turning to God, finding God, getting a sign from God in the desert, but we also saw her speaking with her mother, getting praise from the DEA, and it feeling like Rue's life was going to get back on track. Whilst that all seems good, this actually has all the makings of a tragedy being on the horizon. Rue isn't trusted by Alamo, not in the slightest, and we saw that she was now being tasked with breaking into Laurie's safe and getting all of the money and items that were stolen from Alamo when Laurie's men broke into the club. This is what we're going to be seeing taking place in the next episode. Rue received a phone call from her mother when she was inside of the church, and with them actually having a pleasant conversation and them both telling each other that they loved one another, with Bishop also telling Rue that he paid her mother a visit because he doesn't trust her that much. It makes me feel like something is either going to happen to Rue or her mother. Whilst Rue could end up dead, what we might end up seeing instead is that the pursuit for a better life could end up costing you everything that you care about. Rue is essentially playing Alamo with the DEA, just like Alamo's mother played Preston for everything that he had, and he can see that there's a rat in Rue, hence why there was talk of rats, mice, and snakes in this episode. The story of Alamo buying the snake so he could always be reminded that you can never truly trust a person, especially somebody that you're caring for, is the perfect way to sum up his relationship with Rue. She was coming for him, and he was that meal that she was sizing up because she didn't want to end up in jail. With Laurie wanting to partner with Alamo because he had ambulances as part of one of his businesses and they could just float across the border with stuff in them, with the border actually shutting down and Laurie seeing it as getting one final big payout to be able to live the rest of her days without needing to truly work. Alamo agreed to do so, but only because it's going to bring them closer together. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. He's going to double-cross her because she's already tried to play him, and with him learning the lesson from his mother of never trusting a woman after what she did to Preston, a good man that Alamo cared about, that's a lesson that sits with him to this day. Rue is currently betraying Alamo, Bishop, and Faye, all because she's now in this position of looking out for her own survival, or nothing at all. So with her turning to God, she's hoping that the salvation and forgiveness for her past sins is what's going to allow her to navigate out of this life that she's found herself in and the darkness that plagues her every corner. During the ending, she was listening to the Bible when she was almost hit by a truck, but when she stopped, she saw a burning bush in the desert. This is something that does feature in the Bible and is recorded in Exodus 3. This was seen as a miracle that was interpreted as God first speaking with Moses. With this occurring moments after the audio version of the Bible was glitching in Rue's car, Rue's life was saved and she ultimately got onto her knees, so I feel like she's going to interpret that in the exact same way. Bishop didn't trust Rue and reached out to her mother so that he knew that she could use her as a leverage to keep Rue on track, and with Rue telling her mother that she loves her, I think that just might be the thing that does it. Rue will suffer at some point in this season, whether it be her life or somebody that she cares about. She's been searching for God and she stumbled across the devil, which is Alamo, and the devil doesn't leave without causing any harm or without taking a price. So I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen with Rue's story. Nate. Now, there are two story arcs in this season of Euphoria that feel a bit pointless, and Nate is one of them. The second is, yeah, you guessed it, Jules. Honestly, at the moment, Nate's story is just to appear for a few seconds, get spotted by Naz's henchmen, try to escape, but end up getting caught. I don't know whether this is because Jacob Elordi had a heavy filming schedule when this season was being filmed, but it just feels like he's barely in the show, and considering he was such an important character before, he's just kind of shoehorned in for a story that isn't actually that compelling because it's just so repetitive. So I'm hoping that's going to change. I thought his story would have much more depth and would see him either building towards a dark ending, but nothing has really changed. The only level of depth that we got to his story was the fact that he was destroying the flower and symbolically ruining their life because that single flower that was growing in the ground was single-handedly being the root cause of all of the issues in his life and was ruining his. He's lost a couple of toes, a finger, so I wonder what's going to be next. Jules. Like with Nate, Jules is the other story that isn't really going anywhere. I can see the depth to it, but we're just not really getting the screen time with her to explore the theme of passion versus money more. Jules gave up art school and the dream of pursuing her passion for the opportunity to just sit like a princess trapped at the top of a castle. Ellis is essentially paying her to stay in his apartment and to be the only person that she's intimate with. She gets to live in a beautiful apartment and she gets everything paid for. But what we've seen with her is the boredom that it comes with because her passion isn't being fulfilled. In an episode where Rue spoke to her about a greater purpose and the idea of living for something that was greater than just herself, Jules saw that she was quite literally doing the opposite. She wasn't allowing herself to fulfill her passion. She didn't have true connections anymore, and she wasn't even allowed to be in love with who she chose to be. The money that was being provided to her to just sit there silent in the shadows was ruling her life now, and she didn't want to part ways with that. I think Jules' story would be way more powerful if we got more screen time with her, but we're just simply not seeing that. When Jules hit Rue because she basically didn't like what Rue said to her because she was dishing out the truth, it wasn't called for. Rue was basically saying how she wanted to start a life with her and be with her in a romantic way, but Jules couldn't see that being the case, and even if she wanted it to be, she couldn't because she's made her bed with Ellis now. She's chosen a fantasy world where the person that's being intimate with her doesn't even love her because he cares about his own family more. Jules is a lost cause right now. My review of the episode. I thought this was a really good episode of the show. As the season's gone on, it's formed a bit more of its own identity, and I'm beginning to really like the direction that it's going in. The opening scene of this episode, where we saw a younger Alamo and how he essentially learnt his morals from his mother, and it took him losing somebody that he cared about after being exposed to his mother being a con artist. It was dark, and it then made sense as to why Alamo had a mistrust of people and was so wary, because he was raised by somebody that deceived people their whole lives. I did really like that opening scene. It was almost like a short story or a fable, and the connection later on in the episode where the snake was essentially his mother was a nice touch. I do think Rue and Cassie stories are the strongest in the season. I feel like they have the most substance, consequences, and things at stake. With Jules and Nate, yeah, things do matter with them, but they're just not getting the screen time. I thought it was a bit of a shame that Maddy didn't actually end up having that much screen time in this episode, but I feel we'll make up for it in the penultimate one of the season. With Cassie removing her account, Maddy is going to have something to say about that, and she's not going to let that slide, because if she signed a contract, she'll find herself wound up in financial issues, just like Nate is. One of my favourite scenes in this episode was the meet between Laurie and Alamo. I loved how both sides were just eyeballing each other the entire time, and I really wanted to see if it was going to kick off. It was just so tense. When it does inevitably ignite between them, it will be worth it, because it's going to have been a season's worth of tension in the making. In terms of the visuals, I made the mistake last week of saying that it's been made to look like it's been shot on film when it actually has, and now I can see that. The scenes in the desert just always look so gorgeous, and like what Maddy said, Alamo's club is just so photogenic and looks great on camera. I also thought the same for the final scene where Rue was in front of the flames. Lexi is a character that I would also like to get a bit more screen time with. We're seeing her now getting her opportunity to write for her sister, but with Cassie most likely being roped back into working with Maddy despite acting being her dream. This will cause Lexi's hopes for writing to be shot down and for her to suffer again at the hands of other people's actions. I am really enjoying Season 3 of Euphoria, and I think the theme of reinvention and looking to better yourself, but it coming with a wider cost, is something that's being explored really well. With only 2 episodes to go, I am intrigued to see how it's going to conclude and if this is going to be the ending of the show for good, or if this is its soft launch back to returning every couple of years. I guess we'll just have to see. So, there you have it, Euphoria Season 3 Episode 6, Ending Explained.